it's going to be a quick workflow on how to set up and start designing a shoe in Gravity Sketch. So the first thing we'll do is set up our environment. We'll go in here and we're going to locate a shoe last. Now with Gravity Sketch, we offer a few free OBJs, so you can go ahead and grab this if you have a landing pad account. So we'll just come over here until we find the men's athletic shoe last. We're going to grab that, and we just grab it, hold it, and put it inside of this box here, and then it populates in the space. It should go right into the center of the world, and hit accept here, and now that's in your space. So we can just double check that that's where we want it. And I'm going to put this on its own layer. So I'm going to make a new layer that we're going to add the next bits of our workflow on. So I'll push the blue button and grab the layers panel. Anything in Gravity Sketch with a border, of course, you can grab it and hold it and keep it in your space with you. I'm going to make another layer. This is layer 2, and I'll lock this layer because I don't want to ever move the last from the center location. And on layer 2, I'm going to bring in an image. So I'll go back to the blue button here, my menu button, and I'll click on my images. And I've set up my images in folders, so there's a couple of different folders I can pick from. I'm going to go to the shoes here and just toggle through until I find something that I like. So here, I'll grab this guy here, and I'm just going to bring it in. And now I want to scale this one up, so I can just grab them, scale them up, and if you highlight, you can see the little anchor here. That means it's locked to your UI layer. So it's actually a reference image. It's kind of like a mood board image. So what we want to do is grab this guy, and you'll see that the anchor populates here, and we're going to push that button, and now when you highlight, it's red, and that means it's detached. So it scales with your sketch. So we really want this to be part of the sketch, as part of our reference. The next thing we're going to do is put this guy right in the location, the center of the whole world. And so you'll see that it snaps there ever so slightly. And so it's snapping right in place, but we want to scale it up a little bit because we're going to try to line it up with that shoe last so we can get as accurate as possible here. So this is my line sketch and my actual real world constraints, which is the shoe last. So right when I have it kind of where I want it, I can use my smart move to kind of get it right in the perfect location for me. Okay, and that works pretty well. And I can also move the shoe last a little bit to get that maybe in a little bit better location. If you zoom in, you can get more fine-tuned with this. All right, so that's probably as good as it's going to get for this demo. It's going to work just fine. So next thing we'll do is remove the shoe last. We're going to lock this layer here, and then we can also turn the opacity layer down a little bit so it's a little bit transparent. That means I can kind of see everything behind here as well. I'm going to create another layer, and with this layer here, I'm going to start to outline the shoe. So to do this, I'll go to my tools. I'm going to click on my ink tool. I prefer the ink tool just because it has a nice taper. If I click it again, I'm going to be able to grab the editing panel here, and I'm going to turn on planar. What this does is it gives me this plane that I can access with my left trigger or my non-drawing hand trigger, and I can just half pull that trigger and hover, and then it will snap straight to that image. And so now I have this laser that directly kind of shoots straight to the plane, and I can start sketching and outlining the shoe sketch that I brought in. And I'm not being very precise with this. I'm going to tweak it quite a bit after this, so I'm just kind of being fluid and trying to treat it very much as like a gestural sketch. So in a short period of time, I've reproduced this more or less. And what I can do at this stage is I'll turn off planar just to get the plane out of the way. I can come in and start editing these strokes. And of course, I'll have my edit panel here, which I'll keep docked in my space. And now I can really get these lined up. And so I can just tighten up the lines here, remove some points by grabbing them and pushing the red button. And yeah, that's pretty good. I could edit multiple points at the same time by just highlighting everything, holding down, and when you grab it, don't worry, it's going to snap right back in place. And I'll hit the blue button here, my edit button. And so if you hold it down, you can access all the points at once. And this is really helpful, so I don't have to go to each point. So I can edit everything at once. And I get where I want to be with this design. Again, even still, I'm not going to be super precious about keeping it exact, because as a sketch, there's still some embellishment, right? And so we know that when we come into 3D, there's a lot of things that we're going to have to face, a lot of realities here. So I'll let the last dictate some of the design as well, because those are the real world constraints that I have to work within. So, but I do like to keep certain curves, right? Some certain curves are really important for this design, especially like the heel and the toe. These are characteristics of the shoe that we want to keep, or at least try our best to keep. All right, so we're kind of in the position where we're pretty close to what we want. Let's do this little detail here. The great thing is that when you have planar on, when you're in editing mode, it stays planar, right? So no matter what I do, I won't pull it off the plane. This helps tremendously for the setup and getting everything just as you might want it. Let me add another point here, actually. Get a tighter radius. Kind of want these two lines to have similar point count, and you'll see why that's important later. So do our best to do that as well. All right, great. So pretty comfortable and happy with that. Maybe, I mean, you could spend as long as you want finessing this, but I'm pretty comfortable for the sake of this demo. You understand that phase there. I keep saying that and I go back to these points, but let's just touch this up really quickly, and then we can close this off. Cool. So I'll go back to my layers, and now what I want to do is hide the 2D graphic layer and bring in the shoe last. So again, the real world constraints. I'm not bringing it in all the way. I'm just bringing in just a bit and keeping that translucent behavior. And then I want to pull these off. I'm going to lock this, pull these off of the plane. And so now I'm kind of lining up this side of the shoe. So I know that these things are going to sit on the outside of the last. And I can make the full opaque last here. And then here I'll pull this off just to give it the width. And one thing is, I know that it's going to be pretty much mirrored across, and I could have done this actually earlier, but I'll do this now. I'll come in and I can create the mirror of this exact stroke by going into edit mode and flipping on mirror, and now I have this stroke mirrored. And it's still planar, but what I want to do is bring everything close to each other, and the last, and no shoe symmetrical, but we're going to solve this a bit later as well. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here, and we'll start working through this process. And now that both of them are mirrored, I'm going to grab each one and also turn off the planar constraint. And what this is going to allow us to do is edit these guys as 3D splines. So we just moved from it being constrained to the plane that we defined to it being freeform. And I'm just going to move these close to the last and get it like as kind of tight and close as necessary. And you can just use the visual constraints to get this to feedback, get like that visual feedback to get it to intersect and see where you want to kind of define it. And of course, where it's not symmetrical, no shoe symmetrical. So one thing that we're going to want to do now is break that symmetry constraint. And luckily for us, we can do that in the edit panel. So what we'll do is now bake the symmetry, and now we have two separate strokes with their own points. I can start pulling that stroke out a little bit and give this the same type of treatment. And so what I'm doing here is I'm using the smart move so that I can keep it as I guess asymmetrical, symmetrical as possible. And the way of viewing that is just by turning this transparency on, and you can see that the lines more or less are exactly the same, although they're wrapped around the shoe last. And we'll do the same thing with this. And so we're going to do this with each stroke. It's a bit of a tedious process, and we're working on ways of making this faster, but it is quite fast compared to some of the more conventional ways of tackling these complex curves. We'll add a point. Sometimes you got to add points and just tweak things around until it feels right. So we'll add a point here as well. Cool, and that kind of gives us what we want. And so we'll do the same thing with the sole. So we'll come in here, we're gonna make a mirror of it, we're gonna change the planar constraint, and now we can start bringing this together. Now here, what happens is, because I use this curve to almost show like the sketch gesture, it's not really gonna give me the right representation that we're looking for. So you're gonna have to freestyle at this point. What I mean by that is bring these in and start pushing and pulling things around to get them tightened up to the last. And this is why that sketch isn't the definitive, I guess the definitive form that we should follow. We should always follow the last, but it's a good guideline, and we're getting really close to that original design that we wanted to achieve. Okay, and then we're gonna bake the mirror and jump over this side and do some editing here. And we can use that smart move by lining your controllers up. And so now kind of gotten a nice good grasp on how that plays out. There's just some constraints here that we might want to tighten up, and I'll edit both of these lines at the same time. We don't have joining lines at the moment, but that is something that we're looking at, so you can just join these in the future. Okay, great. And so we'll do the same thing here. Again, a bit of a tedious process, but quite fast, all things considered. So then we'll turn on the mirror, and we can start doing the same thing. And again, as I mentioned, we're gonna have to freestyle this a little bit, just because our sketch wasn't exactly what we were trying to achieve in the real world with the physical constraints. And we probably want to add points now that we're doing some of this curvature. You're going to want to bring some points in to impact that curvature. Great. And then we'll bake it, come over this side, and finish off the editing. Great. So now we have our sole pretty much lined up, and one thing that is quite apparent is that the last is not respecting the sole. Now we could have done some things, or the sole is not respecting the last. We could have done some things in the setup to prevent this, but instead we're just going to start fudging things around. So we're just going to tap this down a little bit, and we'll edit both of these and bring this toe out a little bit here. So that should accommodate. Now, I'm not a footwear designer, but this should give you a little bit of perspective on how you might get started, at least from a visual standpoint. So again, we're not looking at production ready stuff here. We're just looking at how we can get a nice visual representation, a 3D sketch essentially. And from there, we're able to then take this and have a bit richer of a conversation with maybe another designer, or maybe the engineer or the factory that's actually going to bring this to fabrication. So again, it's not the may not be the perfect workflow for taking it straight to manufacturing, but it's a good workflow just to get your idea out in 3D. And you could cheat things as well. So I imagine if this was a flexible upper in terms of the material, that the shoe last will then take the shoe would take the form of the actual foot once it's in there. So I kind of feel comfortable leaving that center line in there where it intersects with the shoe last. But I don't feel comfortable with the heel line, so I'll fix that now. I'm leaving these lines constrained because I think they give a little bit of shape and character to the shoe. So I'm leaving these planar because they're actually giving us the information from the profile perspective. We'll come in here and do the same thing. So I'll mirror this guy and turn off planar, bring this around, tighten this up. And this is only going to be a rendition or a quick concept. So just showing you how to get to a really nice 3D concept. not necessarily something you're going to want to pass over to engineering team. We can cover that in another demo. But for this demo, it should just help you get started and start fleshing out some ideas that you can then either take screenshots to Photoshop or jump into KeyShot and do some quick rendering and get started. But all of the processes and steps that we're showing now, you can do this like to the 10th, 11th degree, essentially. Just really spend a lot of time tweaking and tuning and getting into the design process. And with this video, what we're looking to achieve as well is just a bit of feedback from the community and people that are working in the footwear space, and maybe some of the features that they've been struggling with or looking to better understand, or even some of the features and tools that we might be missing that would really accelerate this process. So as you get started and as you start using this workflow, or maybe copying and working through this workflow that we're sharing right now, there might be some insights that you can drive, and in the next demo we can make sure we pick that up and cover those things. Yeah, so from there we're pretty set. Now we should have a nice, pretty decent wireframe from the original sketch, so I can hide the shoe last. And oh, there's a line I forgot in here. We can bring that guy out. We'll do the same thing. Let's do a quick edit here. We'll mirror it. Turn off the planer. Bring it close. I'm not bringing the shoe last in for this. I'm just gonna approximate. It's pretty good. And then I'll bake it. Come over here and edit this side. And we're gonna bring that out. And I might want to bring the shoe last in at this stage, because just realizing that the contour of the foot is going to really make a difference here. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to want to add points as well, so we can see that we need to achieve a certain type of curvature there. We're going to have to bring a point in to do that. I'm predicting that's probably the same thing here. Yeah, so let's do that as well. Great. And so actually when I get to this stage, there's some things of the design that I would probably want to add that I didn't add in 2D. So you actually start addressing quite a few things when you get into the 3D world. Like, all right, I definitely want this bit here to be right center and maybe rotated ever so slightly. Then to show some definition, I probably want to have some sort of toe cap here. And so now you can go straight into this 3D sketching. You could always do this from the beginning, but once you've converted that 2D sketch into a 3D idea, you start to see all these different possibilities that you want to explore and investigate. And so I can quickly hash out this guy and say this chases alongside the shoe all the way back. Do the same thing here. And if I wanted to add some materials to this, or start to build out the shape and form, I can do that with surfaces. So I'll bring in some surfaces next. I'm going to add another layer for that. So I have this nice little wireframe, and now I'm going to start bringing in surfaces and start polishing this thing up. So to do that, I will go to my surfaces, and I'm going to lock this layer, or actually I'm just going to turn a little bit translucent. And then I'll work with my surfaces now as maybe a nice blue color, light blue. And I'll go to a metallic, metallic material. And so with the surface tool, you can just make loads of surfaces in free space. So you can approximate and just try to get the surface that you want, doing it this way, or you can use the bridge command here, and you could bridge a surface across points, and so, or across curves. So you have these two curves, and I can bridge the surface, and from there I can come in and start editing the surface. And so the first thing I'll do is come into the edit mode and just start building off of this. So very similar to how the points work, you have a pair of points, which we can actually add more rows to. You'll see here in a minute. And I'm just going to line these up. I don't actually want these to stick perfectly. I like the character of it being a bit loose. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to delete some things to make it a bit smoother. You'll see me deleting points in between here quite often. And I'm deleting everyone in between. You can also do the point reduction. Somehow I just like working directly with my hands. I don't like going to a menu too much. So a lot of things that you'll see me do, you can also do that in the menu. But I like to kind of keep everything right here in my hands, and that's why I often just kind of get this guy out of the way and just work directly with the content. And so when you have this nice little portion here lined up, maybe actually this one needs to rise up a little bit. I'm going to add a row, and so you can add a whole row by using your joystick and toggling over, and then you can get these lines between points. And so once you have that, you can pull the trigger on your drawing hand, and it populates the next row. And so then you confirm that. You could toggle back over to individual points with the joystick, and now you can pull and push these. So this might be a time which is helpful to bring the shoe last back in, but again, I just don't think that's where we want to take this tutorial at the moment. I'm happy to do a tutorial that's a bit more trying to keep things as precise as possible, but what we're trying to encourage with this particular workflow is this freedom of finding form and exploring and kind of waiting to make some of these final decisions until you actually need to, until the production process is kind of kicked off. But being able to give this quick 3D representation and tell a 3D story is quite powerful. And so from here, we might add a couple more surfaces, maybe one back here. And this one I'm definitely going to do the point reduction, so I'll just do that twice. And now going point by point, just pushing and pulling these surfaces around. I'm going to grab this whole row, duplicate this one around. And I'm going to add a row in between these because I want to get that curvature there. So I'll toggle over here with the joystick to this mode, and I'll add that row. And then I can just push and pull things out. And actually, I think I'm not going to try to get a closed volume here. I'm just actually going to push and pull things around. And I might bring the shoe last in. I can start manipulating the shoe last. I'll show you how that's done as well. So we can use that actually as a lot of the volume that's filling up the space here in a moment. So let's do another bit here, and we'll reduce it a couple times. Great. And the reason I like to work in this mode is because these points are going to stay equal distant. So if this was actually a real piece of material, like a ribbon or some sort of braided material of some such, I can know that that's like completely consistent. When I go over into, let's say I go over into Keyshot or something like that, I can apply that material and it will give it a sense of realism. But again, this is just all for that concept phase. Cool. And now you're already starting to identify things, right? Like maybe I'm going to change up the color and let's drop in like this dark, deep, rich red color here. And I'll go back into like a point mode here. Just add a couple of points there for this bit here. Same thing here. I'll add another row right in the middle. That will be this bit. And so what I'm going to do, because I know this is going to sit on the other side, I'll just grab this and move it over here. Wait, we'll do that one more time. Make a copy, and then we can leave the other copy on that side. So it's a quick copy over, and then you can tweak it. And so the most exciting bit for me personally is going to be the sole. So let's get on to the sole. I'll do like a soft gray color for the sole. And we'll go back to our bridge curves. Bridge that out. And actually, I don't want to reduce too much here. I'm going to do this by hand again. And bring this over. And the reason I like the sole so much is that we have this really basic sole from the sketch, but we can get really creative here, and we can convert this to a subdivision sketch or a subdivision model, and then really explore all the different possibilities of the 3D form finding in the tool. So once you bring it all the way around, you can actually loop and close that using your UI here. So we'll just do a quick loop, and that connects everything. And we'll go back into single point mode and just stretch this out to make it a little bit more consistent. And again, I kind of like this overlapping surface thing, not being too precious. It really does come out nicely when you do a quick render, where you kind of, it tells a story and it still feels like a sketch. But definitely going the distance and getting some of the results that we're seeing from some of the power users on Instagram is obviously it's obviously desired. So with a bit more time on each of these tools and a bit more finesse, you can definitely get to that point. But here's just the kind of the groundwork that helps you set that up. Great, and then I'm gonna add a row in between here. Let's just do that one more time. Great. And so then I wanna just do a little bit of shape in the front here, just to give it that feeling. Cool, and I kind of like this just rough forms and shapes. And what I'll do is now I'm gonna bring the shoe last in, and I'm gonna make a quick copy of this. This is actually a little bit of a tricky thing I'm gonna do here, where I'm just gonna move it ever so slightly and make a duplication of it. So now I should be able to have two versions of this. Yeah, great. And so I can drop one version into another layer. And I can hide that lock that first layer again, hide it. And so I have a last on my layer 1 and a last on my layer 5. We're gonna work with the last on layer 5. So this is great. In Gravity Sketch, most of the free OBJs that we give you, you can grab these guys and edit them. And in edit mode, in the panel, you can convert this. So you can convert this to sub D. And now you have an editable last. So we're gonna use this as the main sock portion, or the upper portion of our footwear design. And so we're just gonna quickly push and pull some points around and almost like manipulate the last into the shoe design that we wish. So this is quite nice because it gets you a head start. And again, you could kind of cheat a little bit on certain things. So we're respecting the last more or less, but we're also giving a little bit of room for our own imagination, our own creativity here. And we can get serious maybe later down the pipeline once the design's approved, or once we want to take it to that final stage. But for getting the idea out, we can still kind of do that cheating that we can do in 2D mediums. Just tweaking lines ever so slightly and getting things to look a little bit more, I guess, inspiring. Sometimes things that look a little bit too rigid don't really sell the vision of what you're trying to achieve here. And so once you get to this point where you're pushing and pulling things around, you can quickly toggle between subdivision levels, which is just smoothing. And so now we have a really smooth model that we can work with. I sometimes like working with a faceted model, sometimes like working with a smooth model. It really depends on how complex or how challenging the design is. And for this particular design, it's pretty straightforward, so working with a smooth model is going to be fine. So there's a lot of tweaking, and again, this is one of those things, you can just tweak it as much as you want, as long as you want. But again, for a quick version, quick understanding, taking something into Keyshot, it's probably a little bit better to optimize for a just something that really looks nice. Come back in here and you can tweak it with the original last later. That's why I kept the original last. I can always come back to that. So I don't really like this bit in here, so I'm going to push this and get this to come in a little bit more. And what I'm realizing about this design already is that 2D sketch is a bit optimistic with such a high heel. So drop that down a little bit. And also, you start to see other little areas here where I want to hide this, and I can come back in, edit this piece here. Do the same here. Great, and now we can get over to the last. This is where we're going to have a lot of fun because we're going to really exploit the subdivision tools. And before I get there, I'm just going to hide my sketches altogether. So now I'm working just with the 3D geometry. Come in here and edit. And again, I have this conversion button to sub D. We'll convert that to sub D. And what this allows us to do is work in a much more fluid fashion. So now I can add the base on here, or the footbed. If you grab a line and use your joystick left or right, you could change the width. So lots of really cool features in this edit mode. And what we're trying to achieve this whole time is 4 edges of every section. It creates the most smooth geometry when you line things up like this. And also we have this auto snapping for 4 edges, so keeping 4 edges works in your favor. Cool. Sometimes you need to add rows here just to compensate for areas that they may be missing. So I'm just adding row by hovering and then pulling the trigger, and that will drop a row in there. So just hover where you want to add the row, and then you pull the trigger and it adds it automatically. And the idea is that you end up with 4 points, or 4 points that you can connect within at every section. Okay, so, and when they snap, you can see that they just auto smooth, which is great. So you don't have to worry about that. All right, and here we're going to have a little bit of an issue. So the idea is to add a row here, and then we have 4 points that we can pull into here. Great. And there's loads of tutorials out there on how to work with subdivision. It's not a new modeling technique by any means. So feel free to go and check out YouTube tutorials and things like this, and most of that stuff will apply to Gravity Sketch. We obviously haven't had the years of development on this for the level of features that you might find in tools that have been out on the market for longer, but the core principles of subdivision modeling we've captured in the tool, and we're going to be enhancing the tool set as we go. Cool. So yeah, now I have a pretty convincing sole, and I could add something on the upper layer there as well. But this is actually just a quick way of getting started. Pulled some things together. I can go in for the laces if I wanted to, and some eyelets. So maybe that's a direction I might want to take, and I could add another layer just for these features. If I want to do some white eyelets, I can use my revolve tool, come in here and probably just do a few. Quickly edit these. This is just all suggestive stuff, really. You may have some eyelets that you can import from some files that you have as a reference, and that works really well as well. But just to give that feeling of, completion, you might want to just kind of quickly sketch it out yourself. And also keeping that looseness is quite nice. Here you can see that this is really standing out, so we'll pull this a little bit tighter. And then we can add some laces. And we'll probably use the red laces, that deep red color for the laces. And to do this, I'm using point input. I'll use a soft material, and you could just click away. And I'm lacing just like I would normally lace my shoes. And then when I come back and edit, I can come in and kind of tweak this and add points where need be. I can complete this as well. And it's a bit too thick, so I'll just change the thickness a little bit. And I can turn it flat as well, so you can have these kind of flat laces. You'll notice that it pitches up high like that, which is completely unnormal. So I can turn on these arrows here, which help me reshape or reposition the shape of the stroke. So now it sits a bit more flat, something I'd be more familiar seeing. But before going too deep into that, I'll probably lay out everything the way I expect it to sit, where it's going through the eyelets properly first, and add the points that may need to be added there. And then it is a lot of work, so coming in and tweaking all of these is not necessarily something I'm going to enjoy. So I'll go back to the round strokes for the laces, and then just finish adding these things up so it looks a little bit more realistic. It's not cutting through the foot material too much. Yeah, so there you have it. That's a quick tutorial on just how to get started. A couple of basic principles, a little bit of sub D, and again using that shoe last to fill out some of the workflow. So in a short period of time, you should be able to get something out the door and come in and take a screenshot potentially, take that into Photoshop as a perfectly proportioned or perspective sketch, and then you could use that as a sketch overlay for your Photoshop file.